Okay, so picture this. It's 1832. You're standing in what's now Wyoming, middle of absolute nowhere, and you see a figure coming toward you through the trees. And before you actually see him, you smell him. A mile away, like literally a mile. Wood smoke, rancid bear fat, sweat that's been soaking into the same buckskin for maybe 7 months straight, and something else underneath all of it that your brain can't quite identify, but really, really wants to get away from. That right there? That's a mountain man. A real one? Not the handsome Leonardo DiCaprio kind from The Revenant, the actual historical article. And today we're talking about what his hygiene situation actually looked like. Because the romantic version Hollywood sells you? Yeah, that's a lie. The real one is so much worse and weirder, and honestly kind of impressive in a horrifying way. There were about 3,000 of these guys roaming the Rocky Mountains between 1820 and 1840. And every single one of them was, by modern standards, a walking biohazard. Let me show you. So let's start with the basics. When was the last time a mountain man took a bath? The answer is, who knows? Could be weeks, could be months, could be since the last rendezvous, which was a whole year ago. Bathing just was not a priority out there. And before you say, well, they had rivers, they must have washed sometimes. Yes, sometimes. In summer, when the water wasn't going to kill them. Because here's what you forget when you watch those pretty Western movies. Rocky Mountain rivers run cold, snowmelt cold. We're talking hypothermia in 10 minutes cold. And you know what kills a trapper faster than being dirty? Being wet and cold in the middle of nowhere with no dry clothes and no fire because you're being followed by a Blackfoot war party. So no, you don't bathe. But wait, it gets grosser. Because mountain men didn't just passively let themselves get dirty. They actively greased themselves up. Bear fat was the skincare product of choice. They'd render it down from bears they killed and slather it on their hands, faces, and hair. Why? Mosquitoes mostly. Rocky Mountain mosquitoes in July will take a grown man to his knees, and bear grease was the only bug repellent they had. It also helped with sunburn, frostbite, and that wonderful dry, cracked skin situation that happens when you spend all day with your hands in ice-cold creek water setting beaver traps. Now layer that grease on top of months of unwashed sweat, campfire smoke, blood from skinning animals, and whatever you had for breakfast, which was probably buffalo, for like 9 months in a row. And then imagine the clothes. Buckskin, by the way, gets weird when it's been worn for a year straight. It stops being flexible leather and starts being something closer to cardboard. Cardboard that has fused with your body. Some trappers literally had their clothes rot off them in strips before they bothered to replace them. Oh, and here's my favorite detail. When they did eventually get new buckskins, you know how they softened the new leather to make it wearable? They chewed it with their mouths for hours, just gnawing on it like a dog with a bone until it was pliable enough to sew. Yeah, enjoy that mental image. Okay, so now we need to talk about the guests. Because when you don't bathe for months and you're wearing leather clothes and sleeping in furs, you are not alone in there, not even a little bit. Head lice, body lice, fleas, ticks. Every trapper journal from this era mentions them constantly. It wasn't, do I have lice? It was, how bad is it today? These bugs were just part of the experience. A constant, itchy, crawling companion that you accepted the same way you accepted the weather. Now here's where it gets interesting because mountain men came up with some creative solutions. The most famous one? Ant hills. I'm not kidding. You'd take off your lice-infested shirt and leggings, spread them flat over a big ant hill, and just walk away for a few hours. The ants would swarm the clothes and eat every single louse, every egg, every flea. A free pest control. You'd come back, shake off the ants, and your clothes were clean. Well, cleanish. The grease stains were still there, and the blood, and the smoke smell. But hey, no more bugs. And this is where Hollywood gets something really wrong, and it's my favorite mountain man myth to bust. You know how every movie shows these guys with huge, scraggly beards? Yeah, that's fake. Most real mountain men were clean-shaven because of the lice. See, a beard is basically a five-star resort for head lice. It gives them somewhere to hide, somewhere to breed, somewhere to migrate to when you try to pick them out of your hair. Trappers figured out real fast that shaving your face made the lice situation way less horrible. So they shaved, with knives, in Cold Creek water, with no mirror. I honestly don't know how they didn't cut their own throats doing it, but somehow they managed. There's another reason too. When they traded with Native American tribes, which was constant, the natives thought full beards looked bizarre. Some tribes actually called bearded white guys dogface as an insult. And since trappers needed to stay on good terms with the locals for trade, food, and not getting murdered in their sleep, they kept the face fuzz under control. So, sorry, Grizzly Adams fans, the real mountain man looked a lot more like a dirty version of Davy Crockett. All right, buckle in, because this is where things get genuinely upsetting. Mountain man medicine, there were no doctors out there. There were no hospitals. If you got hurt, your options were heal yourself, die, or get lucky enough to stumble into a friendly Native American camp where somebody might actually know what they're doing. And the injuries? Oh, the injuries. Let me tell you about Thomas Smith. Thomas was a Kentucky boy. Pretty unremarkable, until the fall of 1827 when he was out trapping beaver in what's now Colorado with a guy named Milton Sublette. A skirmish broke out and Thomas caught a bullet just below his left knee. Shattered the bones. He lay there on the ground for an hour before his companions could drag him out of the line of fire. When they finally got him to safety, Thomas took one look at his leg and knew it was going to kill him. Gangrene was coming. And out there, gangrene meant you were dead in a week, screaming the whole way. So Thomas asked his friends to cut the leg off. They refused, every single one of them, because nobody wanted to be the guy who killed their friend with a butcher knife. So you know what Thomas did? He did it himself. He asked the camp cook to bring him a butcher knife. He took a big swig of a whiskey called Taos Lightning, which according to one source was strong enough to peel the hide off a Gila monster. And then he started cutting, through the skin, through the muscle, through the tendons, all the way down to the bone, fully conscious, while his friends watched. When he got to the bone, Milton Sublette finally broke and helped, sawing through it the rest of the way. And then, to stop the bleeding, they heated a rifle barrel in the fire until it was glowing red and pressed it against the stump to cauterize it. Thomas passed out. But he didn't die. A band of Ute people found him and took him in. And a Ute woman chewed up some roots and berries into a paste and spit it onto his wound. And somehow, he healed. That winter, he carved himself a wooden leg. And for the rest of his life, everybody called him Peg Leg Smith. He went on to trap for another 12 years, by the way, with the wooden leg that he would sometimes take off and use as a club in bar fights. Absolute legend, and Thomas wasn't even the worst case. Let me tell you about Hugh Glass real quick. In August 1823, Hugh was out scouting for game near the Grand River when he stumbled into a mother grizzly with 2 cubs. That bear tore him apart. His scalp was partially ripped off, his throat was punctured, his leg was broken, his back had so many deep gashes that his ribs were actually exposed. His companions killed the bear and carried Hugh for 2 days. And then the leader decided it was pointless and assigned 2 men, John Fitzgerald and a 19-year-old kid named Jim Bridger, to sit with Hugh until he died and then bury him. 5 days went by. Hugh didn't die, and Fitzgerald and Bridger finally decided he never would, so they took his rifle, his knife, and his gear, they dug him a shallow grave, and they left. Except Hugh didn't die. He woke up, alone, in a grave, with a broken leg and maggots eating the rotting flesh on his back. And you know what he did? He set his own broken leg, and then he started crawling for 6 weeks, over 200 miles, through territory full of wolves and grizzlies and tribes that wanted him dead, living on berries, insects, and whatever meat he could scavenge from wolf kills. And here's the part that'll mess with you. Those maggots eating his back? He let 'em, because maggots only eat dead tissue. They were keeping his wound from going septic. Nature's wound care. Gross, but effective. Hugh limped into Fort Kiowa alive and lived another 10 years. Now you're probably thinking, okay, so the trauma injuries were insane, but what about the everyday stuff, the little things? Because in 1830, those little things are what killed most people. And this is where it gets really grim. Because mountain men were dropping dead from stuff that a pharmacy today could fix in 20 minutes. Dysentery from drinking out of the wrong creek. Typhus from their own lice. Cholera if a contaminated water source got into a fort. A tooth abscess could absolutely kill you, and a lot of these guys had multiple rotting teeth at any given time. They just yanked them out with pliers when the pain got unbearable. No anesthetic. Just bite down on a stick and go. Let me tell you about William Bent. William ran a trading post in Colorado called Bent's Fort, and one day he caught diphtheria. If you don't know what diphtheria is, it's a bacterial infection that basically grows a thick, leathery membrane inside your throat until you can't swallow or breathe. It is a terrible way to go. By the time William was really sick, he couldn't eat, couldn't drink, couldn't talk. His Cheyenne wife saved his life in a way that is, I'm not going to lie to you, pretty creative. She took a hollow feather quill, forced it down his swollen throat past the infection, and then fed him by putting broth in her own mouth and blowing it through the quill into his stomach. For days, because there was no other way. Then a Cheyenne medicine man showed up with the actual cure. And this one is, okay, listen, he collected a bunch of sand burrs, which are these little dried plant seeds covered in tiny sharp barbs, kind of like botanical Velcro from hell. He tied a string to one, rolled it in bone marrow grease to make it slide, and shoved it down William's throat. Then he pulled it back up. The barbs scraped the infected membrane off the inside of William's throat on the way out. He did this several times, with several sand burrs, and it worked. William Bent lived. That was frontier medicine. That was the cure. Your options were sand burr in the throat or die. Pick one. And for the everyday aches and pains, there was a product called Turlington's Balsam of Life. This was a patent medicine from England that was 26 herbs mixed in alcohol, and it was marketed as, and I quote, "I'm a remedy for every malady." Mountain men carried bottles of this stuff with them, like it was penicillin. Did it work? Absolutely not. It was mostly just booze with some sage in it. But in a world where the alternative was nothing, a bottle of herbs and whiskey felt like magic. Okay, now I need to tell you about the rendezvous, because if you thought the baseline hygiene situation was bad, wait until you see what happened when they all got together in one place. Every summer, usually around July, every mountain man in the Rockies would converge on one location. Green River in Wyoming was the most common spot. We're talking 400, 500 men, plus hundreds of Native American traders, plus mules, horses, buffalo carcasses, trading tents, whiskey barrels, the whole deal. For 2 weeks straight, now. They take every sensory thing I've told you so far. The grease, the lice, the rotting buckskin, the months unwashed bodies, the wounds, the teeth, multiply it by 500 men, pack them into a meadow together in 90-degree heat, add alcohol, and let it simmer for 14 days. That's a rendezvous. One visitor to the camp reportedly described the smell as so bad that his horse literally refused to walk into it. The horse. The horse said no, and horses are not picky animals. The rendezvous was also where hygiene sort of happened. Kind of. This was the one time of year mountain men might actually get in a river on purpose. Not because they were finally clean, but because everybody else was doing it, and you could smell yourself. It was also where a lot of them got new clothes, got their hair cut, had somebody pull a bad tooth for them. A little mini spa day if your spa was a muddy river and your dentist was a drunk trapper with a pair of rusty pliers. It was also where the STDs happened. I'm just going to say it. There were women at rendezvous, mostly native wives and traders, and a lot of unprotected, very drunk, very unhygienic activity. Syphilis spread through these guys like wildfire, and in 1832, there's no treatment for syphilis. You just had it. Forever. Slowly rotting your brain for the next 20 years. After the rendezvous ended, everybody would stagger out of camp, broke, hungover, and somehow even dirtier than when they arrived. And then they'd ride back into the mountains for another 9 months. And the whole cycle would start over. So here's the weird part. Here's the thing that doesn't add up. Given everything I just told you, you'd expect these guys to all be dead by 30, right? They weren't. One historian pointed out that mountain men, on average, actually outlived their clean, civilized counterparts back east by about 20 years. They'd stumble out of the wilderness in their 50s, 60s, sometimes 70s, toothless, scarred, limping, missing fingers, but alive. Tough as old leather. Why? Because every single thing that would have killed a normal person had already tried to kill them, and they'd survived it. The weak ones died in year 1. The ones who made it past 5 years had essentially been stress-tested by evolution. Their immune systems were built like fortresses. The dirt, the grease, the lice, the bad water, the infected wounds, it had all just become background noise to their bodies. And here's what really messes with me. You know who was dying in droves back in the clean, well-dressed East Coast cities during the same era? Everybody. Cholera outbreaks, tuberculosis, typhoid epidemics, diphtheria killing children by the thousands. Civilization had plumbing and laws and church on Sundays, and it was a biological death trap. The mountain man had none of that, and somehow he was doing better. I'm not saying you should stop bathing. Please keep bathing. But I am saying the story we tell ourselves about hygiene and civilization and progress is maybe a little more complicated than we think. The rugged, scraggly, bear grease-covered, lice-infested, self-amputating mountain man. The guy who smelled so bad a horse wouldn't walk into his camp. He outlived you. The real mountain man was not the romantic frontier hero Hollywood sold you. He was a walking biohazard with rotting teeth and maggot-healed scars. But he was also one of the toughest human beings who ever lived on this continent, and the fact that any of them survived at all tells you something kind of beautiful and kind of horrifying about what the human body can get used to. Anyway, that's Mountain Man Hygiene. Sleep well tonight, I guess. Go take a shower for no reason, just to celebrate the fact that you can. If you like this one, I've got a whole video about what Wild West dentistry actually looked like, and trust me, it's somehow worse than what you just heard. Click it on screen right now. And if you're new here, hit subscribe. I cover weird dark history every week. You'll like it. I'll see you in the next one.